Hello, this is Mike Tegman, assistant professor here in the MS Hale program at UCSF. And today we're going to talk about variation, which is one of the most important competencies you can develop as a leader, particularly as a healthcare leader who's working on making improvements in your system and organization. It is one of the four lenses of the system of profound knowledge that Dr. Deming puts forth as a kind of a unifying principle for organizing improvement science. And my experience, having worked with variation and helping folks understand it for 30 some odd years, is that once you get it, you can never look at data in any circumstance or any situation the same way that you may have before. It is a vital component. We're gonna talk about it in four general different areas. One, we're going to look at it from a personal perspective of how it might just help you as an individual with whatever it is you're thinking about doing. We're going to talk about it in relationship to your improvement projects, capstone projects associated with this program and healthcare improvement in general. We're also going to talk just a little bit about how to think about building a dashboard of organizational vital signs that give you a look at how your system and process are doing from a number of different areas, similar to the way we look at a patient and their respiratory rate and their temperature and their blood pressure and their oxygen saturation and their end-tidal CO2 levels or whatever other things we're monitoring for them. And we can do similar things for our organizations on customer satisfaction, our financial performance, our staff satisfaction, our infection rates, our clinical outcomes, and kind of get us a picture that gives us a sense as to how well our system is doing and if anything needs particular attention. And then we'll also look at things from the perspective of reading the news in the newspaper, and when you see data talked about, you'll have a different view to look at it. And we'll take a look at kind of all of these things together. When it comes to understanding variation, leaders who make decisions without knowledge around variation and understanding the distinction between common cause and special cause variation often cause worse performance and misattributed credit, misattributed blame. And the basic concept of this theory of variation, it comes from Walter Shewhart, who was a statistician and leader at Bell Labs back in the early 1900s. And he talked about common cause variation or random variation. These are causes that are just inherent in the system or process, and they exist over time, and they affect everyone working in the system and affect all outcomes of the system. And when you have primarily common cause variation, it is a sign of stability of an organization or process. It doesn't mean it's stable good or stable bad. It just means it's stable and it is predictable. Unless something changes, the next thing you're measuring performance-wise is likely to fall within the same parameters as all the data that you've had before. The other is special cause variation, and these are causes that are not always part of the system. And they don't necessarily affect everyone, but they arise because of specific circumstances. And understanding how to work with and inquire as a leader into data that shows either common cause or special cause variation is a really helpful way to kind of ground your leadership style. And if you've got a stable or common cause variation system, in order to make improvement, it requires a fundamental change to affect the future performance. Something in the process or structure or system needs to actually change in order to be able to produce the improvement that you're looking for. So it's very common to be in meetings and have people circle individual numbers when they see a sheet of numbers, and that is usually because they've decided that somehow that number is special, it has special meaning. And they do that kind of based on gut instinct or experience or whatnot. And with understanding variation, we make this a more exact science so that you're not excited or disappointed by things that are inappropriate. And I've said this before, of all the aspects of understand variation that's most important, the most important thing, and I always encourage people in live sessions to write this down, is that given two different numbers, one will be larger than the other. And so understanding that kind of basic part of variation, given two different numbers, one will be larger than the other, and it doesn't necessarily mean anything. And you'll see analysis that is inappropriate and inaccurate frequently, or where you'll see 3 data points and it'll be called an upward trend, or now we have a downturn, or a rebound, or a setback, or a turnaround, or a downward trend. And all of these are just bull. They're not statistically valid or reasonable. The way we monitor performance data for variation is we place the data in its naturally occurring time order. So by day or by week or by month or whatever your measurement interval is, and then whatever it is you're measuring up here on the y-axis. So for this example, just a quick run through. This is the amount of time it took me to get from my house to my office when I lived in Largo, Florida, and worked in Clearwater, and I was averaging around 30 some odd minutes. And one of the rules of understanding variation is when you've got data, just plot the dots. It is always the place to begin. You can do it on the back of a napkin. You can draw an x-axis that looks at the time and the y-axis for whatever it is you're measuring, and just plot some dots to get a base understanding of what's going on. And one of the things to keep in mind is with variation that all processes have variation. The weight, body weight that I had yesterday morning is not exactly the same as the body weight I have this morning. Might not be exactly the same as the body weight I have tomorrow morning, but it's all within a range. And so don't forget that 2 different numbers don't necessarily mean that anything in the performance or process has changed. So when I just plot the dots for the time it takes me to get to work, I have what is referred to here as common cause variation. That is that variation that is inherent in the process. And we'll go over quickly here in a minute the rules for distinguishing common cause variation. And from a leadership perspective, whether it's a project leader or an overall leader in an organization, one of the questions to always ask when you see a performance data that is common cause variation is ask this question: is it good enough? And if your performance is good enough and it is a stable system, meaning there's no outside changes, that your next dots are going to be predictably in line with the dots you've got now, and your performance is good enough, you don't necessarily need to put a lot of attention on this. You can just relax and monitor this and know that it's okay unless something changes. On the other hand, if it is not stable or not good enough, then maybe it's time to charter an improvement project. So one day I was, as I was driving to work, I was on my motorcycle and I came up to an intersection, red light, stopped at the intersection here, and a little bitty Toyota pickup truck blew through the intersection and was double broadsided on each side. I put my kickstand down on my motorcycle and went over and was playing paramedic while other people were on cell phones calling 911. The person in the pickup truck was unconscious, unresponsive, with severe trauma. He also had an EMT uniform on. It turned out he worked for me, and it was early morning rush hour traffic, so we decided that we would use the helicopter and fly him in. I flew part-time on the helicopter, so I climbed in to accompany him to the hospital. He did get into the operating room and managed to make a full recovery from his injuries, but that particular morning was a special cause variation in the amount of time it took me to get to work. Special cause variation is variation that happens outside of the normal process. So the crash, the ride to the hospital in the helicopter, the getting a ride back to my motorcycle, all causes significant delay. And when you see data that's got special cause variation, the reasonable question to ask is, what happened here? What happened here? And so There are two different types of charts that we use in order to be able to monitor and track variation. The first is the run chart, and run chart is when you have less than 20 data points, usually more than 12, less than 20. And you're looking for rules that help you identify non-random variations. So if you get 6 or more data points above or below the median, which is the center line, then you have special cause variation. If you have 5 continuously ascending points or 5 continuously descending points, you have what's called a trend, another signal of special cause variation. If you have too few or too many runs, and a run is a collection of points below or a collection of points above the median. In this case, you've only got 2 runs here, and we'll show you a chart in a second that will allow you to look at the number of data points and the number of runs to see whether or not it's too few or too many. It's statistically calculated. And the other one is if you've got an astronomical data point. Astronomical data point. So if you've got an astronomical data point, it's the key to let you know that there's a special cause variation. For the too few or the too many runs, basically this is the table that allows you to assess this. It comes from the book Data Sanity by my friend Davis Balistracci. And basically over here you look at the number of data points that you have on your chart, and then you count the number of runs. And if you have a number of runs that is, if you have 10 points and it's you have more than 3 or less than 8, then it is within common cause variation. If you have more than 8 or less than 3, then it is special cause variation. So when it comes to control charts have, in addition to the center line and the dots placed on it, there is a calculated upper control limit and a lower control limit. And this is usually based, if you're a math person, 3 standard deviations above and below the median, based on the median moving range of the data. So it is based on the variation that is within the data. It's not points that you set, it's points that are calculated and determined by the spread and variation of the data. So if you have a single point that is outside of the upper control limit or below the lower control limit, that is a sign of special cause variation. If you have 8 or more consecutive points above or below the center line, you're looking at special cause variation. And when you're doing improvement work, this is the kind of change you're intending to create in your system or process. The next one is if you have 6 consecutive points increasing or decreasing. This is a special cause of a trend. And remember, on run charts it was 5 or more. On control charts you need 6 or more, ascending or descending, in order to have it be a trend. If you have 2 out of 3 consecutive points near the upper or lower control limit, it is another sign of special cause variation. Or if you have 15 consecutive points very close to the inner center line, many software programs, including QI macros, will put third lines in there for you. So if these are all within that inner third, that is a special cause variation. So this is an example of a control chart with 2 special causes. This is door-to-device time with life-threatening medical emergencies. How fast are you able to get a device implemented to restore flow? Usually these are occlusive situations in the brain or in the heart. And you've got one data point here that is above the upper control limit and one that is well below the lower control limit. So in both of these circumstances, it's reasonable as a leader to ask, what happened here? Something outside of the base process happened to cause these 2 particular data points. Whereas when you see this kind of data, you've got door-to-device time, you've got all of your data points are in between the upper and lower control limit. You don't have any runs of 8 or more above or below the median. I don't see any trends of 6 or more data points continuously ascending or descending. There's no clusters of 15 around the edge. There are no places where you've got 2 out of 3 data points near the outer edge. So this is all common cause variation. So the question you would ask yourself as a leader here, or ask your team is this performance good enough? And in this case, you've got performance that shows a significant decrease, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 continuously descending data points. This is a trend. And you also have a run here of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 data points that are below the center line. So in this case, if the goal is device time less than 90 minutes, in this case, something has happened that has caused performance to get worse and stay worse. So the process that produced this performance is different than this one. So as a leader, this is something you'd want to ask: what happened to cause our performance to decrease? And so this is looking at data for customer satisfaction survey results. And here you have a chart where you've got a couple of data points beneath the lower control limit, a couple above. You have a run of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 data points that are above the median. So this is a shift in performance. The proper thing to do when you do this is to readjust your upper and lower control limits and your center line to capture the new process. And something has caused an improvement in your customer satisfaction scores that have taken them from about 73% to about 83%. So this is a significant and meaningful improvement. So you'd ask yourself, what happened here to cause this kind of improvement, the kind of thing we're looking for? So I mentioned at the beginning that sometimes there are personal ways to understand and use variation. And for me personally, I've had some pretty severe knee problems here over the last few years, and finally had a double knee replacement about 6 weeks ago now at the making of this video, 6 weeks ago Monday. And one of the things I have noticed as part of this is, since I haven't been able to work out or do the kind of aerobic exercise that I used to do, my blood pressure has crept up. So my new personal physician has decided that she wants to work with me to address my blood pressure issues. And so as part of this, it's like I put together a control chart that just looks at my blood pressure over time here. And here's my systolic blood pressure. And this is what it's looked like over the last few weeks. And you can see I've annotated in here. Here's where we did a trial of hydrochlorothiazide, a little bit of a diuretic. It turned out to be miserable, giving me pins and needles, kind of a restless leg syndrome, and was pretty awful to be on. So I discontinued it here, let it clear out of my system before starting lisinopril, which is a different approach to managing blood pressure. And you can see that from my systolic blood pressure, we have no special causes here. So it is all common cause variation. So far, my systolic blood pressure has not changed. Let's take a look at my diastolic blood pressure during the same time. So we've got the same annotations here for when that happened. And you can see here we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 below the center line. If I'm lucky and I get a 6, 7, and 8 beneath the center line here, I might be able to get a special cause show I'm decreasing my blood pressure. But at this point in time, we have no results around it. Just something to think about. It is always entertaining to be the one in the meeting where somebody, throws out a headline or pulls out a research study and says, hey, the crime in Oakland, homicide numbers have risen for the first time in 2 years. What are we going to do? We need a big homicide reduction project. And they'll head down a rabbit hole where you can pull up the data. In this case, I got this data from the FBI's Uniform Crime Reporting Statistics. And it comes through here. We did skip 1 year because the data was not submitted. So I took that year out in the calculations. But you can see here we've got a control chart that has a special cause up here, and then we've got data points above the upper control limit. We also have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 points above the center line here. And then we've got another run over here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 below the center line. So when you make the correction for the run here at the end, the homicide rate in Oakland has actually dropped significantly from the years from 1985 to 2012, and has dropped down here to these lower numbers for 2014, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19. So the headline is actually incorrect. It says that homicides have risen for the first time in 2 years, which seems like homicides are on the rise, but actually they are on the decrease in Oakland, and I hope, since I have so many friends who live in Oakland, that continues. Another use for understanding variation is to take a look at your organization's vital signs. And what I encourage you to do is to have just a handful, 5, 6, 7, 8, key performance indicators that give you as a leader an overall gestalt view of the performance of your unit, your organization, whatever that happens to be. Very similar to monitoring vital signs for patients. So whether it's the number of patients who are discharged and returned to the hospital, patient harms that happen, time for radiology reports, patients readmitted, whatever that happens to be for your organization, having a family of measures that you have on run charts and control charts that you're able to look at overall and see if you can notice anything that might be a foreshadowing of a problem is definitely something worth taking a look at. And lastly, and as certainly as it relates to your program and project here, is really using variation as part of the strategy for your improvement project. So this is one we've some of us have talked about before. This is a hospice-related project where this is Ventura County, California, 911 patients who are on hospice being pulled out of the hospice system and transported to the hospital emergency departments. Not the best care for hospice patients, not in line with their hospice team's wishes or the patient's wishes in many cases. So when we started this project, we were transporting about 80% of hospice-related 911 activations. And you can see we got a big special cause drop here with the implementation of a community paramedic program, which was the change idea that was associated with this. And that took it down to 33% of patients being transported, a significant drop. And then we went ahead and expanded it to the rest of the system and just taught everybody, not just the community paramedics, how to work with the hospice system. And we've now got the transport rate down to 17%, one of the lowest and best in the country. And when you look at doing improvement work, these are the kinds of charts, this is the kind of variation that you want to see. So I hope you have found this useful, and that you'll look for opportunities to use and explore variation in your personal and professional lives. And let me know what questions you've got via email or as part of our CLE here, and we'll do our best to answer them. It's one of those competencies that I find helpful and really fun to have as part of your skill set. Thank you very much.